Hello, welcome to our webinar, which we're calling the Seal of Biliteracy, the Massachusetts Model of Collaboration. My name is Nicole Scherf. I'm a longtime board member of the Massachusetts Foreign Language Association, and I'm also a professor at Salem State University.
And I'm Phyllis Hardy, and I'm Director of Extension Activities and Advocacy for the Massachusetts Association for Bilingual Education, or MABE.
I'm Helen Solorzano. I'm Executive Director of MATSAL, the Massachusetts Educators for English Language Learners.
We're the steering committee of the Language Opportunity Coalition. You can see in the picture on the screen are pictured from left to right, Phyllis, myself, Helen, and Amy Grunder, who's of the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition, or MIRA, the steering committee of the Language Opportunity Coalition. So we're so happy to have you here at the webinar. What is the Seal of Biliteracy? The Seal of Biliteracy is an award made by a state department of education or local district to recognize a student who has attained proficiency in English and one or more other world languages by high school graduation. And the Seal of Biliteracy is a national movement that began in 2011 in California at the district level, and amazingly has swept the nation with 27 states and DC already enacting legislation, but all with slightly varying requirements. In 2015, our parent organizations, ACTFL, NABE, and TESOL, along with NASISFL, released a short guideline document in which they designated a minimum target proficiency of intermediate mid based on the ACTFL proficiency guidelines, which we'll explain in a few minutes. And with a recommendation that we empower students to participate in language learning through Linguafolio, which is a process of providing evidence through I can statements. And we've modeled our objectives on these I can statements. And the objectives for this webinar are that I can describe the Seal of Biliteracy and the National Seal Movement. I can articulate why the Seal is so important for our profession and our students. I can explain the legislative status in Massachusetts. And finally, I can list the various elements and resources of the pilot in Massachusetts as a model of collaborative implementation of the Seal. I'll note that you're all muted. We're going to address questions at the end, but you can type in questions anytime over the course of this webinar in the question box. All you have to do is click on the little red arrow to the right of the screen if your box isn't opened. And also note that we're recording this webinar, and we'll have it available for you at languageopportunity.org. So again, what is the Seal of Biliteracy? It, as I mentioned before, it recognizes high school graduates for proficiency in English and at least one other foreign or native language with a seal on the high school diploma. That's the national description. And in Massachusetts, we've decided to focus on the lifelong learning aspect of language proficiency, and we've elaborated pathway awards to push for the documenting of ever higher levels of proficiency in the foreign language, dual language, and or native language that's being studied.
So the Seal Award is gaining recognition across the country, as Nicole mentioned, as more states pass and implement the Seal of Biliteracy. For students, their parents, and other stakeholders, the award is about acknowledging the work toward becoming proficient communicators. The Seal serves as a catalyst for language learning programs in public schools. The pedagogy in world language classrooms is shifting from grammar and vocabulary-focused instruction to a focus on developing language proficiency through a standards-based approach. Some districts are considering and implementing more equitable programs for English language learners, such as the two-way immersion model, where two groups of students who speak different languages are learning all academics in the two languages. The Seal of Biliteracy is also designed to represent an attainment of bilingualism and biliteracy for future employers. In this next slide, it shows how there is a greater demand today for bilingual and biliterate workforce in Massachusetts. This graph is the result of research by the New American Economy on job postings for bilingual and biliterate workers. You can see that between 2010 and 2015, there was close to a 3 times an increase in this demand. And this demand will continue, especially as large worldwide companies like General Electric and Amazon consider placing their headquarters in Massachusetts. The beauty of the Seal of Biliteracy is that it's bringing together different groups of people that have not traditionally worked together. World language teachers are meeting and working with teachers of programs for English language learners. As a multilingual perspective takes hold and becomes more of a norm in our state, students of different language and cultural backgrounds will have more opportunities to interact with each other.
And now we're going to launch a brief poll. So you should be able to click on an answer. You can click one or more options. What kind of program or organization do you represent? So we'll just take a few seconds to allow everybody to answer. And remember, along the way, if you have questions, you can write questions in the question box at any time. Okay, it looks like people have finished answering, so I'm going to close the poll and then share the responses with you. So it looks like we have 33% answered English Learner Program, 58% in World Language, 18% in Dual Language, 18% in School and District Administration, and 9% in other types of programs or organizations. And now I will hand this back to Nicole and Phyllis.
Great. Interesting. So with the Seal, there is a shift to teaching for proficiency in foreign language programs and a recognition of the native language ability in ELLs that's a skill that students bring to the table in programming. And as Phyllis mentioned, in dual language programming, we can anticipate even higher levels of proficiency in both the native and the dual language. This inverted pyramid represents the levels of proficiency as outlined by ACTFL, and the green band is recognized as the first functional level, hence the intermediate mid as the minimum standard for the Seal. For the partner or world language, there are a variety of tests available to document the proficiency to the proficiency guideline levels. Since the Seal is for biliteracy, in a native, partner, or world language, English proficiency is documented through MCAS and or WIDA Access.
Okay, I thought legislation for the Seal of Biliteracy has been introduced through three legislative cycles in a standalone bill, and also the same language is attached to the Look Bill, or an Act for Language Opportunity for Our Kids bill. The Look Bill is attempting to change Chapter 71A, the current legislation for educated English language learners, to one where districts can have more flexibility with implementing alternative bilingual language education programs in addition to sheltered English immersion programs. This past summer, both the House and Senate passed the Look Bill, but are currently in conference committee to reconcile the differences between their versions of the bill. We are hopeful that the differences will be resolved and that the Look Bill will reach the governor's desk for his signature in this legislative cycle. The Legislative Committee has repeatedly reached out to the Language Opportunity Coalition for consultation on the Look and Seal of Biliteracy bills. When this bill passes, The legislation requires DESE to consult, so DESE is the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, to consult with the Language Opportunity Coalition about the Seal Award and the Pathway Award pilot.
The Seal legislation and the Look Bill were first presented in the 2013-2014 legislative session. Our work group began planning for a pilot in 2014 with the thought that we could begin a grassroots effort in Massachusetts and begin to develop pathways and resources. So our work group was established in 2015, and the first awards for the Seal were given in the spring of 2016. So we find ourselves in 2017-2018 now in our third year of the pilot. You can join our work group at languageopportunity.org if you're not already a member. You can see the districts that have been participating. We really represent a cross-section of types of districts and locations of districts. In 2015-2016, the 10 schools or districts made over 300 awards. In 2016-2017, 17 schools or districts made over 900 awards. And in 2017-2018, we're looking to see even more districts get involved. The number of programs and schools interested in the Seal has continued to grow through the years of our pilot. You can see that my students at Salem State University are involved and received Seals in last spring's Foreign Language Award ceremony. You don't necessarily need to give awards in the school year to participate in our work group. You can be planning to participate in the coming year and just making use of all of our information. Who is in the Seal work group? The steering committee is myself with Phyllis Hardy and Kim Talbot, who is an early adopter in Melrose. And we're joined by a really nice variety of representatives from the various language groups, from World Language Coordinators to ELL directors to dual language program coordinators, immersion program coordinators, college program coordinators, and teachers from all of the above programs. It's been a really exciting and beautiful process to learn from the various groups and to collaborate and come to consensus on materials and resources and standards. We have monthly go-to meetings. Usually we meet the fourth Monday of the month in the school year. We develop materials, come to consensus on standards for implementation on districts, implementation in districts, and we've developed a beautiful Seal Toolkit. You can find our newly updated 2017 Seal Toolkit at languageopportunity.org. The way to join our group is to go to the Language Opportunity website, go to Pilot, and join our Google group. Our Google group will give you access to our Google Docs, which document all of our meetings. We maintain the data through Google Sheets. We figure out how many schools need pins and the like, and how many awards will be given. And we have a beautiful Google Slides presentation that you can use to present about the Seal to your administration to seek approval in your district. And we use GoToMeeting for our meetings, so you can enjoy our work group meeting from the comfort of your home or office without major travel. In our third year of piloting, more than 60 districts are involved in our work group, and the number is growing weekly. I think it's important to note that the Seal and the Seal wording in the Look Bill calls for voluntary implementation. The legislation isn't necessary to implement the seal in your district, but of course we think it adds strength and legitimacy. It's voluntary to participate within a school or a district, and it's voluntary for students to participate. A lot of districts have chosen an application process where students apply to participate. We've been so excited by the grassroots spreading of the wonderful advantages and benefits of the Seal of Biliteracy through word of mouth in between the students and the districts, and that's how we're seeing the momentum grow.
So the next several slides will talk a little bit more about the pathway awards, the criteria, and some of the stories that we've learned from the pilot. The work group chose to create pathway awards so that students in all types of language learning programs are awarded for their efforts in learning a second language and encouraged to continue learning the second language as they move up in grades. Of course, for English language learners, learning English is a requirement, but some have opportunities to continue development of their native language through programming such as TBE, transitional bilingual education, or two-way immersion, or an after-school or even a Saturday program. This graph lists the different awards. The Biliteracy Attainment Award is for students demonstrating language proficiency at the intermediate low level in English and a second language. Once again, we are using the ACTFL can-do descriptors to determine what does intermediate low proficiency means. The Silver Seal Award is for the intermediate mid-level of proficiency in English and a second language. This is the level recommended by the national guidelines. The Gold Seal Award is for the intermediate high level of proficiency in English and a second language. And finally, the Platinum Seal Award is for the advanced low proficiency level in English and a second language. The left column shows the different grade configurations when students may earn the Pathway Award. For example, students at the end of elementary in two-way immersion programs, students at the end of the middle school in world language programs, and students at the end of high school who began learning a second language at high school through the world language or even the language immersion program like the Muniz Academy in Boston, can all earn the Biliteracy Attainment Award. The elementary students in two-way immersion programs and the middle school students in world language programs who continue learning the second language as they move up in grades will have opportunities for earning the other pathway awards. High school students can continue learning the second language in college and hopefully earn the Platinum Award upon college graduation. As mentioned before, each award signifies the student has reached a specific level of language proficiency. This graph shows the criteria for assessing the English language for the two state-required assessment instruments, the MCAS English Language Arts and the Access English Language Development assessments. While the two assessment instruments assess different language skills, English Language Arts is different from English Language Development, both assessments are appropriate for determining that the student has reached the English language proficiency for that specific award. The assessment results for each award is the level agreed upon by those in year 1 and 2 of the pilot and also meets the recommendations of the national guidelines. The Biliteracy Attainment Award is the only award with some flexibility to meet the needs of both ELLs, English language learners, and the English-only elementary students in two-way immersion programs. We hope this award encourages the students of two-way immersion programs to continue learning through secondary school. In the next slide, this graph shows the criteria of assessing the native or world language for the most common assessment instruments used in language learning programs in our pilot. The AP, the Apple, and STAMP assessments come in many different languages, but not all languages, and as mentioned earlier, are common at the secondary level. Aprenda is an example of an assessment of the Spanish language used in elementary two-way immersion programs. Again, the criteria or score on the assessment instrument for each award signifies the student has reached the specific level of language proficiency for that award in the native or world language. Next slide. The national guidelines also recommends the use of portfolios in the assessment process. Some districts are using portfolios to document growth in language proficiency over time, particularly for districts using Google Docs to collect evidence of examples for speaking, reading, and writing in these two languages. This is most common in elementary and middle schools. This is also utilized for students who speak a language in which there's no standardized assessment, such as AP, Apple, or STAMP. So as we mentioned before, we don't have an assessment for every language group that comes into our schools. But these standardized assessment companies are developing more assessments for more languages every year. When assessing examples of evidence for the three modes of language, speaking, reading, and writing, schools are bringing together teachers and community leaders to assist in assessing levels of proficiency using rubrics such as WIDA's proficiency definitions and ACTFL's can-do descriptors. Slide 27, portfolio options. Districts have the options of requiring additional criteria beyond standardized assessment. This is a list of examples of additional criteria some districts are requiring to earn the pathway awards. This is communicated to students early so that they have enough time to complete the tasks required under additional criteria. In the next slide, this slide is specific to English language learners. Those in the pilot who are supporting English language learners have also learned to take into account these additional equitable considerations specific to English language learners. For students arriving after grade 3 or in secondary grades, the years of schooling where the language of instruction has been in the student's native language is evidence of intermediate or higher proficiency in the student's native language. We need to remember that these same students are not familiar with the U.S. forms of assessment. The pilot has also taught us that there may be other unique situations for English language learners. For example, let's say a student arrives in grade 9 and takes the MCAS in grade 10, scoring at needs improvement. The student can graduate high school without the need to take the MCAS again. But to earn the Silver Award, the school would use the years of schooling in their country of origin as the evidence of intermediate, mid, or higher language proficiency in the native language, and the student has time to reach an intermediate level of English proficiency by the time they graduate high school. As an identified English language learner, the ESL and SEI program would follow state requirements of annually monitoring and assessing the English language development with the Access Assessment. This scenario is an example for why the assessment for English is MCAS and or the Access score. Finally, we need to remember to assess the native language of English language learners, especially if they were in TBE programs and redesignated as a former English language learner, or if there were no language learning opportunities in their district, but their families made sure they were continuing to develop their native language. Next slide. The Language Opportunity Coalition created certificates for the different pathway awards. In the first year, we purchased pins with the seal design from the national movement. Most districts are creating award ceremonies, acknowledging this award on students' transcript, and even purchasing a different color cord, similar to those being acknowledged as an Honor Society student, to be worn during high school graduation ceremonies.
Here's a glimpse of some of the linked table of contents of our toolkit in the Google Docs, as well as on www.languageopportunity.org. All of the topics that we're discussing now related to the implementation of the seal and resources for the seal and the pathway awards and the way to carry out the ceremony all came about as a result of discussions that we had in our Seal Workgroup. We developed our agenda for the Seal Workgroup based on attendees' questions and FAQs that we wanted to develop. And in fact, in this latest version of the toolkit, we've included a long section of frequently asked questions and discussions that answer some of these questions listed. I really can't emphasize enough how powerful it has been for me to participate in this work group and to learn from the other groups who want to value language learning as much as I do, but come from it as from a different perspective. It's been a very fascinating and interesting process.
So now we're going to launch a second poll. Are you currently involved in the Massachusetts Seal of Biliteracy pilot project? There's 4 answer choices. You should be able to click on one of the answers. And we'll wait a few minutes while you answer. And also remember, you can write questions in the question box if you would like. Great response. I'm going to close the poll now and we'll look at the results. So we have 11% say that their school or district has made awards, 20% say the school or district is in the planning stages, 43% say they would like to become involved, and 26% maybe it doesn't apply, but you want to support the project. So that's great that we have so many people who are not involved yet but want to be, as well as all of you who are already involved.
Definitely, definitely. And as I've said before, if you are interested in joining our group, the more the merrier. Go to www.languageopportunity.org and join our Google group, and you'll start to receive information and questions and information about the next meeting. We've learned so many lessons through our work over the past several years in the work group. There is certainly power in numbers. We've just found out that we've probably, before our legislation has even passed, given out more seals than states who have enacted legislation, because we came together, we're working together, and we're making it happen. Collaboration with foreign language, dual language, and ELL groups and teachers strengthens our message and broadens the impact, as well as the number of target recipients of the award. Participation and collaboration with the pilot supports the creation of resources and helps us to think about various scenarios that we might not have considered. And documentation and creation of resources support new districts as they enter the pilot. So those of you who are interested in joining us will benefit from the years that we've already put into developing resources and creating materials for you. One of the interesting resources that was updated over the past summer in our toolkit and was created by Kim Talbot of Melrose is called the 10 Steps to the Seal of Biliteracy. We're not going to go through each of the steps in major detail. We were thinking we might hold a second webinar in the spring where we delve into this topic and show model examples of pilots who are implementing the seal in the various programs. But the 10 steps to the Seal of Biliteracy include determining the stakeholder as task 1. How can you involve all of the potential seal groups in your district? Get everyone involved. Task 2 is determining the accolades system that's already in place. How is language and biliteracy already celebrated in your district? Task 3 is determining a proficiency philosophy. How does your program align with proficiency goals? I know as a foreign language educator that this is a really big national shift in teaching philosophy and changing the orientation of programming from a traditional grammar-based program to one that focuses on proficiency development and rewards proficiency development. Task 4 is determining your allies, who can support your efforts and how. Task 5 is determining the proficiency assessments that you'd like to use or assessment that you'd like to use. How will you test for proficiency? What languages do you need to be testing for, and which tests will best accomplish those testing needs? Task 6 is determining a funding source for testing. How will you pay for the proficiency testing? Some members of our pilot are paying for it out of departmental budgets. Some departments have found grant funding, and some departments are having their students pay for the test. Task 7 is informing students and parents of the test. Really important to get the stakeholders on board and excited. How will you outreach and get the word out and get people as excited about the seal as we all are? Task 8 is deciding how you will administer the test. When will it take place? Will you use class time? Will you use mid-year or final time? Will you do it after school? Task 9 is determining how you will access the ELA MCAS data, the English proficiency data. Where is that housed in your school? How can you get that information? And task 10 is determining how you will award for biliteracy. How will the seals be awarded? What will the seal look like? What levels of the seal do you need to be ready to award? We were very happy to see districts in the first year of our pilot giving seniors the silver, the gold, and the gold. The silver, the gold, and the platinum award. It is perfectly attainable at the high school level to receive the platinum award. So you can find more information about these 10 steps at and as well as all of the resources and our toolkit at www.languageopportunity.org. So we're reaching the exciting conversation point and answering your questions after we take a relook at the objectives that we had for this webinar, which were: I can describe the Seal of Biliteracy and the National Seal Movement. I can articulate why the seal is so important for our profession and our students. I can explain the legislative status in Massachusetts. And I can list the various elements and resources of the pilot in Massachusetts as a model of collaborative implementation of the seal. We really hope that we've organized this presentation in a way that you all feel confident that you can do the following objectives. We'll move on to questions.
Okay, I'm just looking through the questions here, and I'm going to read them, and Phyllis and Nicole will respond. So we have one question about the AP test, and if the AP test could be used at earlier ages as an alternate assessment for students. Younger than preschool.
This is Nicole. I've heard that Utah, which is implementing a huge numbers of dual language programs, is using the AP test in the 9th grade to document proficiency of students. I've also heard that the AP test has tasks in it that developmentally it's a little bit early in 9th grade to be using with students of that age, but they're getting really good initial data from it. In terms of the AP test as a test to measure proficiency, the work group has commented on various occasions that the results of the AP test take a while to be returned to schools. The test is taken in early May, and it isn't until July usually that the scores are reported. So it's a difficult test to use with seniors, for example, if you want to be able to have them participate in an awards ceremony. I think do you have anything to add to that, Phyllis?
No, I think you answered that question nicely. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question about someone who saw the name of their district on that list, but she's not aware of any participation in her district. So how would she find out about that, about what school or program is in her district is participating?
That's interesting. We listed all of the districts who are members of the Google group. That means they may not have awarded any seals yet. They may be just looking for information. I would speak to the ELL coordinator or the foreign language coordinator and see what they know. It actually may just be a teacher who's looking for information to share with the department. Mm-hmm. An interesting question. Anything else to add to that, Phyllis?
I was going to say, we do keep an Excel sheet of all the contact names of people who come to the Language Opportunity Google group, or email us any questions, and so we could check on that as well and answer you hopefully by the time this webinar is over.
And the next question, a clarification. Do English language learner students need to demonstrate proficiency in literacy in their native language as well, or only in English?
I think we answered that question. Yes, you do need to assess what they can do in their native language. As we mentioned before, if they were in a TBE program and you're considering, and they exited at grade 3, we can't be sure that they've continued to develop their native language unless they've done things like Saturday school or after school. Their parents have made the effort to continue helping them at home. So it really depends on what opportunities those English language learners have had in their schooling experience. Of course, if they were in a two-way immersion program or a high school TBE program, or arrived very late and have had years of schooling in their country of origin, those are examples of students who likely will have that level of proficiency. But just like we require English-only students to take the MCAS, English Language Arts test, we want assessments of what kids can do in their native language as well.
Right, and in a related note, some of the more fascinating discussions in our work group have dealt with the word biliteracy and the idea of becoming biliterate. So it really represents the 4 skills. Biliteracy is speaking, writing, reading, and listening, and something that we've really grasped onto as a work group is the idea of lifelong learning and showing the various pathways, so that a student who moved to the district from another country speaks the native language really well. We're looking to see how they maintain the native language. So it's a question of can they keep up and continue to be biliterate in their native language throughout their schooling, and what are they doing to maintain it. It's been a really interesting conversation with all the different possibilities.
And there's a question about American Sign Language. Would ASL qualify for a non-tested language? I
believe that the national guideline says that it does qualify.
Yes.
As a language.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. It was one of the questions the legislator asked, and it most definitely is in the list of possible languages. And I'm not sure what the test you would do to document the proficiency in sign language, but that might involve community engagement or a portfolio kind of system. very interesting.
Are there standardized tests for modern Greek?
We have a list of all the assessments that are familiar to people in the pilot in our toolkit on page 21 and 22, and we don't have Greek listed as one of the languages. So that's a good question. If you do find that information out, we will be happy to add it to our list of assessments and all the languages that are covered.
But again, might be a possibility to involve community speakers of Greek and bring them into the process of helping to document the students' proficiency or biliteracy.
So a question, how does the Seal of Biliteracy account for students with IEPs? If needed, are they able to complete alternative assessments such as portfolio instead of standardized performance measures?
We just began talking about students with special needs last winter, and we have more questions and answers for you, but we do want to include them in the Seal of Biliteracy Pathway Awards. There is a subcommittee, a subgroup working on a new award, a different award for beginner high, which would probably be something that special ed students can receive at multiple different grade levels. And that was one of the impetus, that discussion about talking about special needs students was the impetus to consider another award below biliteracy attainment. It is also an example, when I mentioned before, the example of being a little bit more flexible with the Biliteracy Attainment Award. For example, accepting the higher range of the MCAS grade 5 scores, the MCAS needs improvement section scoring. That's an example of possibly a special needs student being just 2 or 3 points away from proficient because of their special needs, and being flexible enough to include them in that particular Biliteracy Attainment Award. So while we don't have very definitive answers, we do encourage you to think about students with special needs for the awards and do your best as you can. You know, this is a pilot, so every time, one of the things that we do is in the summer after each pilot, we reach out to anybody who was part of the pilot and we interview them through individual interviews or focus groups, learn what they have learned in implementing the pilot in the past year, and then we add that information to our toolkit. So as people start working with special needs students earning these awards, we'll learn your stories and we'll share those stories with everyone.
Although the flexibility that Phyllis is discussing has been really a discussion for our elementary schools and middle schools. We thought that the Seal of Biliteracy linked to the specific proficiency level, silver intermediate mid, gold intermediate high, and platinum advanced low, really needed to be a standard that was standardized and easily transferable across state lines, and something that students could take as a strong sign of their college and career readiness. I think our early discussions in determining what the pathways would be and determining what the awards would be, we were very firm that seat time shouldn't count, grades shouldn't count, tests like the SAT-2 in language that really are very grammar-based shouldn't count to document proficiency, because what does sitting in a classroom for 4 years say that the student can do with the language? Not much. So our discussions have led to some flexibility, but also some firmness about the standard that we're setting in Massachusetts that has a national transfer in terms of the proficiency level that it represents.
Let me just also add, because the question was also asking about portfolios. So this is a very good example of when to use a portfolio for students with special needs. And as I mentioned earlier, oftentimes portfolios are used at elementary and middle school, sometimes in high school, but we're noting that the elementary and middle schools are using them the most, and they're using them because of variabilities of students. You know, students also have different characteristics. You might be an introvert or an extrovert, and without really knowing who that student is, and portfolios are allowing you to collect multiple pieces of evidence to show how the student is growing and developing the language and hopefully reaching that criteria for the award that they will be considered.
All right, and just had one last comment. I thoroughly agree and would strongly encourage departments at the high school level to consider portfolios so that students can more actively participate in their proficiency development. It is a really beautiful thing to have students study their portfolio documentation over the years and see their growth over time.
Okay, another good topic, how can a university get involved?
That's another area where we're working to create a subgroup, and I will be leading that subgroup. I participate in the pilot in the last school year with my students. We participate in proficiency testing as a part of our accreditation of our student teacher programs, our student, I'm sorry, our teacher development programs. So that was already in place, and we've just expanded it to include our other student populations outside of our licensure programs to reward them for attaining the Seal of Biliteracy. Note that the Platinum Seal is the only seal that is appropriate for the college level, and it's very interesting that ACTFL required that our teaching candidates attain advanced low as part of our accreditation process. So we've been documenting that for some time. If you're interested in participating in this subgroup and learning more about implementation at the college level and helping to delineate and designate the various steps and resources that might be helpful for the college level, please contact me and I will include you in the group. My name is Nicole Scherf. My email is Scherf, S as in Sam, H-E-R-F as in Frank, .Nicole, N-I-C-O-L-E, @gmail.com, and I'm glad to have you participate in this subgroup, which I'm going to start in the spring.
And a related question, will this award count towards college credits?
That's something that some states have gone a second step. I know Illinois, as an example, passed their seal earlier in the process and passed a second legislation which granted college credit. It's certainly a direction that we'd like to see legislation continue, although I don't know if we're up for even discussing new legislation before this legislation passes. I think that once the Seal of Biliteracy or the Look Bill pass, we will be outreaching to universities, talking about what the proficiency levels mean, and saying that students in K through 12 are graduating with seals and that college credit, and we'll be making recommendation on college credit. We do hope that's something that is in our Massachusetts future.
So we're almost out of time. I think we have a chance for, we can answer one more question. There's a question about, have any schools in the pilot considered using language learning software such as Rosetta Stone, Duolingo, or Babbel for students to demonstrate proficiency in a language?
That's not that I've heard, and as a language teaching professional, I would not recommend using a computer program to develop proficiency, because a computer program really can't understand the intricacies of negotiating meaning and the interactive component of language development that's so essential. So there's my 2 cents.
And there was a clarification question just about whether all students have to take the access to demonstrate English proficiency or only the EL students.
Just the ELL students.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I think that's the time that we have for the questions. There are some various resources offered which we can share, and we will also share the link to the recording and the slides after the webinar.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us this evening and for your interest in the Seal of Biliteracy. Please, if you're not a member of our Google group, join up and become part of the grassroots movement that's changing how we discuss and teach for and reward biliteracy in the state of Massachusetts. And feel free to get in touch with us after if you have any follow-up questions. Thank you so much for joining us.